What is it like to be the editor behind some of the most successful films in box office history? What are the contributions an editor can make to this kind of success? And what's the career path that leads an editor to this enviable position? Hi, I'm film editor Lawrence Jordan of Master the Workflow, a community dedicated to educating people about the world of professional editing. Our course, Feature Film Assistant Editor Immersion, has become the de facto standard for those wishing to learn the real-world workflow of feature film and television editorial. If you like what we're doing here, please support us by hitting like and subscribing to our channel, and click the bell at the right to be notified about future videos. You might know the name Jeffrey Ford as the editor of some of the most successful and exciting box office films of all time, including Marvel's Iron Man 3, the Captain America trilogy, and Avengers Endgame and Infinity War. But Jeff's work goes beyond the realm of superheroes and CGI extravaganzas. He's also cut powerful dramas like 1 Hour Photo, Shattered Glass, Crazy Heart, and most recently The Comey Rule and Let Him Go. Jeff's not only an editor at the top of his game, he's also a genuine cinephile who possesses a deep knowledge and love of the filmmaking craft. Collectively, the films Jeff has cut have earned over $4 billion in global box office. Today, I'm excited to present to you part one of our exclusive one-on-one talk with Jeffrey Ford, ACE. We'll do a deep dive into subjects like his career path, get insights into editing mega hits, about his workflow techniques and challenges, and much more. If you love movies and want a deeper understanding of the editing craft from a consummate filmmaker, I know this is something you will really enjoy. So let's get to it. Jeff, great to have you here. Thank you so much for being with us, taking the time.
Thank you. It's fun.
Cool.
I love doing these.
Great, man. So we'll just get right into the questions. I know you went to USC Film School, but give us a quick overview of where you went from there. What were your first jobs in post-production? What were your first jobs that really got you into the editing room?
Well, I met a lot of great people at USC Film School, a lot of people who are still good friends of mine today. And I can kind of, it's interesting, my ability to, get into the industry is really a story of relationships with people that I met there, and also, people that I stayed friends with after film school, because I didn't have any connections. I didn't know anybody. I didn't have any family connections to get in. So I basically had to figure out a way. And I like to say that instead of like climbing over this wall one at a time to get into the industry, the mythical wall that surrounds Hollywood, we all kind of got together and walked in the front door together. And I think that's kind of the way it can work if you develop a coalition of friends and artists that are like-minded and are working together to break into an industry or to redefine it. But I basically got out of film school, and like everybody else, I didn't have a job, and I started working as a camera assistant because I knew a lot about cinematography. I liked editing the most, but I wasn't finding any work. So what I was finding is work as a camera assistant, as a focus puller, dolly grip, and also electrician. I was really bad at those things, but I was better at camera than I was at electrician, and so that's why I didn't do electrician very long, because that would have been dangerous. But so I did a lot of commercials, a lot of promos, a lot of jobs where you could work 3 or 4 days, and kind of in those days I could work 3 or 4 days and make enough money to cover a month of looking for other jobs and writing and hanging out with my friends, because I was young and I didn't have a family, and so it was easy to sort of live hand to mouth. But I always wanted to get back in the editing room because I really loved that. And a good friend of mine, James Gray, who I went to school with at film school, USC, he somehow put together a independent film that he was going to make, and he got the money together, and we were all sort of couldn't believe that it was happening. And he's like, we all got to work on it. It's like, it was our first big shot to make a movie. But of course the studio had, they wanted to get an editor on that picture that had some experience, because James had never directed anything before. And so I said, well, I can work in camera because I've been doing that. But that was also sort of already spoken for. So James said, you're going to be the assistant editor, and I'm going to tell the editor that they have to hire you because you're my friend. I'm like, that's not going to go over well. He said, just do it. You can do it. So they hired the editor they hired was one of the greatest people on earth, this woman named Dorian Harris, who's one of my favorite people still to this day. So Dorian was the editor, and I went down to meet her, and she's like, well, I guess you're a political hire. And I said, look, I'll do a good job, I promise. She goes, nah, you'll be fine. Just don't lie, do a good job, and be a good person. And that was pretty much it. So I went to New York and I did dailies for James on that movie in New York by myself. Dorian and Brian Johnson, who was her first assistant, they stayed in L.A., where the movie was going to be cut. This was all shot on film. 1994 is a movie called Little Odessa with Tim Roth, Moira Kelly,
Right.
Vanessa Redgrave, and absolutely one of the greatest experiences of my life. It was like, New York in a winter. They put me up at Sound One. I'd never been there before, and I was in a room. At one point, I got in trouble because they're like, "Are you a union person working here?" And I'm like, "I don't know," and I wasn't at the time. It was a non-union show. Anyway, we shot in a terrible winter in Brighton Beach, and it was this crazy Russian mob picture. It's a really good movie. James did a great job. I think we shot 200,000 feet of film, which is nothing, and Dorian put it together beautifully, and it was a real fast experience. But that was my first job as an apprentice editor, and I got bumped up to assistant. I got enough hours to get into the union. And from there I was off and running, and in terms of like I had a foothold, and one job has sort of led to the next, and blink 30 years go by kind of thing. So
Yeah.
I've been really lucky. And but the first entree, I owe everything to James Gray and Dorian Harris, who both sort of took a chance on letting me work for them, and I did my best because I knew it was a privilege. And then when I finished that movie, I got a call a few months later from another film school friend of mine, Tia Nolan, who was an editor working in the business, and she was working for Richie Marx on a movie called Things to Do in Denver When You're Dead. And she called me up and she said, "Hey, we need an apprentice right away because our apprentice just quit." And so I'm like, "Really?" And she goes, "Yeah." And when you come down and meet, I'm like, "Oh my God, Richie Marx, a hero of mine, somebody that I literally looked up to since I understood what it meant to be an editor." I mean, he obviously involved present at the creation of films like The Godfather Part 2, Apocalypse Now. Amazing. The resume is nuts. And so the chance to get on that crew, I jumped at it, and another case where I owe it all to Tia and I owe it all to Richie for taking a chance on me. But I ended up on that crew on that movie, which was a small independent Miramax movie. That was really the beginning, and that was the foothold.
Wow. So, I mean, it really emphasizes the importance of your network, the people that you knew,
Yes.
James, Tia, and the luck of the draw that Tia was working for Richie, and you got to work for one of the most highly respected editors of all time.
Yeah, I mean, it's being in the right place at the right time is you just can't say that enough, and being available, right? So having the other thing that was available is I had the ability to go crazy and say, you know what, I will take this job for very little money and go to New York, a city I'd never lived in, and basically roll the dice and maybe fail miserably, but I had a chance to take a big risk, and the big risk paid off in that I closed on that movie. I did well. I remained friends with that whole crew to this day. We're still very close, and they they supported me as much as anything. I remember I was sending track back from New York, and I had never done this before. I mean, I had sunk dailies in film school, but I was syncing the dailies and I was marking the track incorrectly, and I was sending it back to LA. Now it was in perfect sync, but the protocol of marking it was very specific, and I was using a protocol that I wasn't doing it exactly right. I got back to LA, and the first assistant took me aside and he goes, "Hey, listen, I want to tell you how I want you to mark this track in the future." And I said, "Oh my God, I've been doing it wrong." And he goes, "Yeah, but it was right." It was right, and Dorian was cool with it, and we said, you know what, we don't want to bust his confidence. We're just gonna let him finish. When he gets back here, we didn't want to upset you and make you worry that you were doing something wrong because everything else was so perfect, and we just wanted to make sure that you knew that this is how you should do it. And I was like, oh my God, you guys, that's an example of what people will do for you if you're doing a good job for them. You feel that sense of camaraderie, but also, you want to help. People want to help you be successful. If you really believe in what you're doing, and if you have passion about it. If you
Sure.
don't like, if you don't like the job and you're doing the job, especially post-production or any kind of motion picture production or post-production, if you don't like it, get out, because it is not a great job if you don't love it. If you love it, it's the greatest job in the world. But like anything, if it's misery, no one wants to be around a miserable person, and you don't want to be there either. Get out. There's plenty of other ways to make money. It's not the most lucrative position in the world, but boy, is it fun if you love it.
Yeah, absolutely. It's not a job that you're going to punch in 9 to 5 and forget about when you go home.
Right. Exactly. No, it's a life's work kind of passion thing. It's a craft. It's something that you learn to do really good over thousands of hours of doing it. and you get better at it. And it's like a puzzle you never solve. Next movie, new puzzle. And if you like making puzzles,
It's a great job.
yeah, it's the
Yeah,
best.
absolutely. So then, after Little Odessa, working with James, you got to cut his picture, The Yards. How did that come about? That was a pretty quick jump.
Well, it's not a linear one. I mean, so I did, Things to Do in Denver with Richie, and then Richie left that film. We went up to Seattle to work on a movie called Assassins, which I think you're familiar with, where it was this sort of like, and then it became sort of the summer of Camp Warner Brothers, because we started shooting in March. We started shooting in March in Seattle, and we had to, in Portland, and we had to be in theaters in October. I mean, if anybody knows, that's a crazy accelerated post. So we were at Warner Brothers in Burbank all summer working every day. I just went every day. Every day I would go home to sleep, shower, come back, and that was it. And we were fed. It was like there was like a legion of assistants working on multiple versions of the movie. We were doing double previews. We preview on a Tuesday, Wednesday, preview in Pasadena. Endless, crazy movie with Dick Donner, and by the way, a lot of fun.
Yeah.
But I think it's generated a few memes. By the way, it definitely has a life. But one of the first internet thrillers, also, by the way, where a movie about using the internet to create suspense.
Right.
Anyway, so I was on that picture, and that was one of those movies where it was so much intense work over such a short amount of time. I learned a lot, had a great time, learned a lot, just being a fly on the wall. Got to meet Dick Donner, who was a hero of mine. I mean, Superman the movie was one of my favorite movies when I was a kid, and getting to meet Dick Donner, work on a Dick Donner movie, that's crazy. Plus, he's one of the nicest people in show business, and you'll hear that from anybody that's ever worked with him. So, amazing experience. Got to meet you and work with you. Tia was on that movie, and interestingly enough, the guy at the front desk answering phones in Dick Donner's office, the guy who would say, Donner, Schuler, Donner, that was Kevin Feige, who became the head of Marvel Studios. So when we were at Warner's, we were all there rattling around, and there's Kevin working as a PA at Warner's, and now he's the head of Marvel Studios and one of the biggest players, if not the biggest player in blockbuster, movie making. And my boss when I work at Marvel, and also, again, like Donner, if you ever get a chance to work with Feige, work with him. He's one of the great people. Anyway, after Assassins, I stayed with Richie's crew for a while. We did a couple of other little fixes here and there, and then we ended up on a Jim Brooks movie called As Good as It Gets. And As Good as It Gets was a sort of year and a half crazy. I mean, you've worked on a Jim Brooks movie, it's insane. And yeah, so you know how that is. Again, you're in a totally insane world where the rules don't apply, and boy, oh boy, it's nuts. And working with Jim and Richie, it's a crazy, intense, creative environment. You're learning a lot. I mean, again, massive lessons to be learned there. And I worked really hard on that film, and it was really intense. And at the end, I was burned out. I was exhausted because it was another relentless production. And I decided I needed a little bit of a break. And Richie was going on to do a movie called You've Got Mail in New York with Nora Ephron, and he said, "Can you work on this?" And I said, "Listen, I want to step off now because I'm tired and I need a break, and I don't want to. I know you need a top person." And so Tia, who was available, said, "Hey, I'll take that job back," because she had gone on to another picture. Anyway, we traded back. I said, "Hey, Richie, Tia's free," so she went on to do that movie, and I was unemployed for a bit, and I thought, I'd take a break. I'm going to do some writing. I'm going to try to work on, getting a directing career going, see what I can get going. And James called and said, "Hey, I am really close to getting this script that I had been reading and doing notes on, a movie called The Yards." He was getting that ready to go at Miramax. He's like, "You got to cut it." And I'm like, "They're never going to approve me. I don't have any credits." He's like, "Let's try." So he said, "I want Jeff to cut the movie." Harvey Weinstein, who we all know what he's all about. Well, anyway, back in the day, he was a very powerful dude at Miramax. He ran the company, and he was the final decider. So James called him up and said, "Hey, I want Jeff to cut the movie." And I said, "Well," and Harvey said, "No, I don't know this guy." And James calls me back and he said, "Hey, listen, I don't think I can make this work, but we got one last shot at it. Do you know anybody, like, who's the biggest, like, superstar person you know, and that will vouch for you?" And I thought, well, I could ask Richie, but I don't know if that's going to carry much weight with Harvey, because he's looking for some assurances that I can deliver on something. And I said, let me try Jim Brooks. I'm going to write to Jim and see if he'll maybe write me a letter of recommendation. So I call Jim's office to get, the address, like to figure out how to fax him a letter to see if he'll write me a letter of recommendation. So I get his assistant. And she's like, "Oh, let me put him on. I'll put him through." And and he takes the call, and I'm like, oh, sorry. I said, Jim, I didn't mean to put the call through, but since you took it, I said, here's the deal. I'm up for this job at Miramax. He goes, oh man, well, great. Let me see what I can do. Click. And I'm like, wait a minute. So he called Harvey and said, hey, this guy's good. I worked with him as an assistant. He's a good guy. You should get him. And I assume that's how the call went. Because 10 minutes later, I get a call back, and it's Jim. And he goes, hey, I got him on the phone. I talked to him about you. I'm like, what? I'm like, that's crazy. So he seemed interested. So anyway, let me know how it goes. Bye. Click. And then 10 minutes later, phone rings. James Gray calls me up. Hey, dude, I don't know who you got to call him, but you got the job.
Wow. Holy
yeah,
cow.
it was insane. So I owe my career to James, Tia, Richie, Jim, Harvey Weinstein. But I don't want to put them in the same list as that guy. But anyway, you never know, like the cycle of it. Anyway, I got approved on that movie. The movie was incredibly difficult film, torturous post-production. I think I might have been fired off that movie 3 times and rehired, as we all were, because it was one of those movies where you'd show a cut, they'd fire you, and the next week you'd come back on and keep working. It was nuts. And it was selected to be in competition at Cannes in 2000, and
Right.
we went to Cannes and we walked the red carpet into the Palais and got the standing ovation, and it was one of the greatest experiences of my life. Amazing experience. I love the movie to this day. I think it's one of James's best films. I'm very proud of it. It was one of the cast has gone on to do a lot of great things. The cast was Joaquin Phoenix, Mark Wahlberg, Charlize Theron, Faye Dunaway, Ellen Burstyn, James Caan.
Wow.
It doesn't get any better than that. And so I was, again, amazing experience. The movie didn't do any box office. No, very few people saw it. It was shot by Harris Savides, who's one of the great cinematographers who went on to do a lot of films with David Fincher. Incredible talent. I mean, learned more on that than I could possibly express. But I should not have been on that movie, and it was I was in the right place at the right time. It was fate, but it was also, a part of it is people. There's a saying, and it's by a coach, and I don't remember who to attribute it to, but the saying is, luck is the residue of design. And I think that, you're just pushing, right, to get somewhere because it's something you love to do, because it's your passion. Well, if you put yourself in the right place at the right time and you're passionate about doing something and you're available to do it, eventually you're going to get a shot. And when that shot happens, you're going to find out if you're good and if you can stay in the game. And I think a lot of it is that. I was blessed with, I have the ability to do it and I love doing it. So it's not a strain or a stress on me. Editing is something I enjoy doing. It relaxes me. It makes me, I actually feel better sitting down and working on a scene than it's
not,
than not. Yeah. So it's like it's, and obviously anything to an excess is a problem. Like after 14 hours, I'm like, get me out of here. But, but when I get there in the morning and I got, you get dailies in there and it's like, oh boy, here's some new stuff. Actors, this is going to be great. Anyway, I'm the luckiest person in the world, but you want to be standing, there when the bus shows up to get on it.
Yeah, and I think that's a really important point, is that comes through to the people that you're working with, and that's what makes them say, "Hey, this is the guy. He can do it." Your passion comes through, and that's a really important factor to remember. If you're not into it, like you said before, get out, because people will sense that and they will pass you over and not pick up the phone and make a phone call to a studio head to vouch for you. I mean, it's funny what you're saying about Jim, because he can be the most intense and intimidating guy you've ever worked for. You're completely terrified of him and think that he might hate you. And then you'll see him and it'll be like, you haven't seen him in 20 years and he gives you a big hug and
yeah.
Yeah.
No, a lot of directors are like that. It's interesting. You work with them. I did a movie with Michael Mann, and when you're working with Michael, it's very intense, and he's just focused, and it's like insane hours, and everything's at highest of stakes, and you have to have that incredible degree of drive and passion, and it takes almost everything out of you, and then and you feel like you've been in war with someone, and it's just nuts. And then, I'll bump into him now and again. We're not working together now, and I'll see him, and it's like, give you a big hug, and it's like, it's someone that you have this relationship with that you went through something together. That
Right.
It's like it's a bond that you have, and the intensity of the experience is very different than when when you go back to civilian life.
Right.
So I think that it's interesting. There is a bond that you make when you're on a movie together, and there's a camaraderie and a collaboration. That's why also I love filmmaking. I think is it's not solitary in a lot of ways like other art forms. I mean, if you're writing a novel, you're kind of in a room by yourself. You might get feedback from an editor or a colleague and make revisions, but filmmaking is a constant series of collaborations. And if you find people that you enjoy collaborating with, like it's like being in a band, you feel like why I love working with James Gray or why I love working with the Russo brothers. It's just that I feel like I'm in a groove with those people, and we can really make something special because together we're greater than the sum of our parts.
Nice. Yeah, that's a great way to explain it. A lot of people have discussed, have described going through a movie like, going to war, or being in the circus.
Yeah.
It's like
Yeah.
you develop these relationships that, if it's a good experience, can last a lifetime. That's a really great story. So you've worked with a variety of highly respected directors on many of their early films. How did you cultivate these relationships? Were they simply projects your agent found for you?
Well, James and I were in film school together, and I met him. We worked together in film school a bunch on a bunch of different things, and we were good friends. I mean, remains one of my good friends, and he was best man at my wedding. I mean, like he's a very close friend. So he was somebody that was a friend and a collaborator, and that's a great thing to have happen. In the case of and then one thing leads to another. Like when we were cutting the yards, we used to. James was friends with Mark Romanek, who was a music video director who was preparing a feature film, and Mark would come by and hang out with us because he was getting ready to go into that editing room mode and a production mode. And he wanted to get a sense of it because he had done short form stuff, but nothing long form. And so he would go visit his friend Fincher, or he'd come visit James, and he'd be there. And so I met Mark, and I liked him, and ended up cutting a movie with him. Another great artist, and I met him through James. And then or for instance, I've done several movies with Billy Ray, great screenwriter, and also a very dear friend of mine, one of my closest friends. He was introduced to me by my agent. I had an agent when I signed on to do the movie. When I did James's movie, I signed with an agency, and I did it mostly because I felt I needed protection, because I knew Miramax's reputation for being a very strange company that had a lot of weird things that went on, and I wanted legal and agent representation in negotiating that deal to protect me and to make sure everything was above board. And I didn't want to do it myself because I had no experience. So it was worth it to start a relationship with this agent, Jay Gilbert, who I've been with since I started. And then Jay was able to, as my career went on, I found, the picture with Romanek through James. And so Jay didn't really bring that to me. But the next movie, I did a movie called Shattered Glass, and Billy Ray was a first-time director. He was a screenwriter who was making his debut as a director on a very small movie. But I said to Jay, hey, listen, when you're looking at scripts out there and there's people looking for editors, I want to do something I love politics. I love stuff about insider DC Beltway stuff. I also love journalism. I mean, these are the thematic ideas that I'm really into. If any of this crosses your desk, can you let me know? Because I want to chase after one of these. And sure enough, Shattered Glass shows up, which was a story about the New Republic, a political magazine in DC, and it was about a plagiarism case. One of their writers had gone off and done and fabricated a ton of stories, and it was the story of the editor who caught him. And Billy wrote this amazing script based on a Vanity Fair article, amazing piece of material, docudrama. And I met Billy, and I said, I love this material. He's like, well, what do you think it's about? And I'm like, well, this is what I think it's about. He's like, you're exactly right. This is perfect. Let's do it. So I did that movie. It wasn't a big movie. It was a small film. But again, I got to work with Billy, incredible talent, a piece of material I loved. The cast was Hayden Christensen, who had just done Star Wars. He was Anakin Skywalker. And everybody was like, I don't know if he can pull it off. And I'm like, I think he can. But it's worth a shot. And he's the guy that got the movie made because he was kind of an up-and-coming star. Peter Sarsgaard, who also hadn't done a ton but was amazing actor. Chloe Sevigny, Hank Azaria. I mean, there's just, again, like crazy good cast.
Great cast.
Like, oh my God, these people. And Sarsgaard's like the greatest actor of all time. Anyway, Hayden stepped up, delivered a beautiful performance. And the movie's really good. And Billy did a great job. Anyway, difficult edit. Very, very hard film to put together on a shoestring, but learned a lot. And lifelong relationship with Billy. I've done, we did Breach together, which was a movie with Chris Cooper about an FBI agent who was selling secrets to the Russians. And then we just finished a movie called The Comey Rule, which is a four-hour miniseries for Showtime about James Comey and Donald Trump. So again, it was like a trilogy of Washington liars or something. But it's been that was a great relationship that my agent introduced me to. I'll never be able to thank him for that, because Billy got me when we worked together on Shattered Glass. Shattered Glass was produced by Tom Cruise and Paula Wagner.
Wow.
Tom Cruise at the time was auditioning to be in a movie called Collateral with Michael Mann. Michael needed an editor. Tom and Paula liked my work on Shattered Glass. Tom and Paula suggested I go meet with Michael on Collateral. I went down, had an interview with Michael Mann on Collateral. He liked me. We liked each other, but I wasn't the right guy for that job. But we hit it off, and he remembered me later for Public Enemies. So again, if I hadn't have met Billy, my agent hadn't introduced me to Billy and I would have never worked for Paula and Tom at Cruise Wagner. Cruise Wagner never would have introduced me to Michael Mann. I would never have gotten Public Enemies. And Public Enemies introduced me to Paul Rebell, my co-editor on that movie. And Paul was the person who introduced me to the people at Marvel, which started my run at Marvel. So
wow.
It's all connected to the people that you work with. And by the way, I didn't plan any of this. I just had one simple rule, which was don't let anybody down, because they're going to remember you. And it doesn't mean you have to, every movie has to be a hit, or every movie has to be perfect, or every movie has to be a masterpiece or an Oscar winner. But if you do your best and you honor them and you tell the truth and you're a good person, in terms of like you're trustworthy, they can count on you.
Right.
You don't let them down. That's it. And if you like the job and you're good at it and people can count on you, you're done, man. You're going to have anything you want in this industry. That's the key.
Yeah.
Is being, try to be someone that people can depend on.
Yeah. And the through line here to me, the theme is it's all about these relationships. And like you say, building trust and working hard and being as good as you can. And having some talent doesn't hurt either. So I know you've got that in.
True. And I'll tell you, there are a lot of people in this industry who are working who aren't great. And I don't mean that like, I'm just saying that there are good people who work hard and are good at their jobs. Like any industry that you'll find are prized. That's not, if you're good at editing or assisting and people like hanging out with you and you're good to be in the room with and you have a good personality and you enjoy it and you have a good energy, you're going to work, because there aren't a lot of those people. Yeah. And there's a lot, I mean, you and I have probably been on crews where you hire someone who's good, but they're not super fun to be around. That's okay. You kind of get through it. Or you have somebody who's really great to be around, but they're not the greatest at their job. That's okay too. But when you're competing for the job, you're actually competing against other people, not just for their skill level, but you're competing for their ability to collaborate, which is a little different than skill set. You know what I mean? The ability to collaborate means how open are you to ideas? How do you respond when you get an instruction? How do you stay late on your own time to show that you really, back the project, not out of a way to just grandstand, but and not to be taken advantage of, but there's a level of commitment that's present in people that you want to hire again. And that's what I look for. That's why I look for an assistant. I look for somebody who's, man, this person has my back, and they also want to edit someday. They want to move up. They want to work their way up the process. We want to invite people into the industry that are going to make it a better place. And, that means we want to invite people in who will make it more diverse. We want to invite people in who are going to make it more creative. We want to invite people in who are going to tell better stories and make better movies. And not that we're sitting there being gatekeepers, but the point is those are the people that you hire again and again, or the people that, have exciting ideas and passion about keeping this art form going. Yeah. Again, it's just not a regular job. And I think most people with any kind of sense of intelligence understand that. But, every once in a while you get a person who's like, hey, it's 7:30. Isn't it time to go home now? And a lot of days it's just not. Well, it's, I also, you could make the analogy. It's a little bit like, baseball or pro sports. It's like, there's different levels of, you can go out and play ball, right? You can go play baseball with your friends on Saturday. You can also play minor league ball or high school, college, minor leagues. Then there's the big leagues, and things are different. And the level of commitment's higher. Is it the same game? You bet. And do you have fun doing it? You bet. But the level of achievement, commitment, focus, determination, and sacrifice is higher in the big leagues than it is when you're playing little league. So there's a progression that happens, and as you get good at something, you have a responsibility to, it's not a job you go, oh boy, I can't wait till I get to the big money and I can just coast. It never happens. There's no big money. There's no coasting. You're going to keep working. The job is the reward. And you have to be very careful about a work-life balance, because it's addictive in terms of fun. If you're really enjoying it, you can end up losing those hours, but it's hard work, and it requires a commitment.
Absolutely. Great answer. I really appreciate that.
Sure.
And I know our students are going to, get a lot out of that, because there's been some, excuse me, I participate in a few online forums about editing, because, keeping some sort of profile, with the business and all that. And, there's this movement about, demanding a 45-hour work week and things like that. And I'm just, while admirable and understandable, on the other hand, there's a certain amount of unreality in that kind of organized demand for that thing. Every job is going to be different. Yes, you are going to have some jobs that are going to have normal hours. I mean, for whatever reason. But again, when you're playing in the big leagues, there's a lot on the line for these people. I mean, what was the budget on, some of these Marvel films? $200-300 million. There's a lot of pressure, and people expect you to perform.
Yes. Oh, for sure. And I think, one of the things about that is, deadlines are always present in whatever you're doing. There's very few jobs where there isn't some sort of deadline involved. And you have to be aware that at some point you might have to dig deep and put in some extra hours. I think the idea that you can keep accelerating the editing process to the point of where it can happen. It has to happen fast. It seems like it has to always happen faster and faster and faster. You can do that, but I think a lot of people have learned that you do that at the detriment of the project itself. In other words, if somebody's working, if you're working 14 hours a day, your decisions in the those last few hours are not going to be as sharp as, at least for me, are going to be as sharp as the ones that you made in the morning. And if you have, like, for instance, one of the things that I do, I try not to work crazy long days. And if I do work them, I make sure that the work that I'm doing later in the day isn't as critical in terms of decision making for aesthetic or performance reasons as the ones I make in the morning. Because I'm a lot more clear about choices in the morning. And then I always want to look at it the next day and make sure that I made good choices. But the other thing that I find that's important is I take breaks during the day. I do just something that I found is helpful to me is I do transcendental meditation, which is just a way to sort of take a little bit of time twice a day to really just stop the incoming information for a second. And that's where the ideas come. Also it's about keeping your creativity alive, because filmmaking is a very creative process. You have to have ideas, and those ideas don't come from nowhere. They come from deep in your in your subconscious, and that is, if you never shut the noise off, you can't make room to listen with clarity. So I feel like overwork causes its own problems, and an artist or a craftsperson knows how much work they can do safely. And obviously that's the other issue. If you're exhausted and you can't drive home, something's wrong. That's too much. So
gets dangerous.
Those limits you have to be able to set for yourself. And any producer or director worth their salt will know that you're doing that in the best. You're saying I need to stop now and rest. That's not just for you. It's for the good of the project, because the project's you. There's no the movie is sort of this collective of all of our energies coming together to make this thing that's going to be, we're going to share with the world. So if any one of us is dysfunctional, the movie's going to suffer. So I think that balance is critical. And but that said, I think you make a good point, which is anything worthwhile is going to be challenging. Who wants to do something that's I never looked at this as I never looked at it as a job.
Right.
It is, obviously, and I'm not being glib. I understand it's a job, and I make a good living, and I'm very lucky to be doing it and getting paid for it. I no illusions about that. I thank my lucky stars every day. I have enormous gratitude for that. But if I had some free time, I'd probably be doing the same thing.
Exactly. I mean, that's what I'm doing. I mean, I'm not working on a film. I'm making my own little films, I guess you could call them.
We were,
But I'm editing every
yeah,
day and I'm shooting every day. And
it's
it's like,
crazy.
this is my time
Yeah.
off.
We were in a very late night DI session one time, and one of the producers goes, "Okay, we're going to go around the room, everybody, and everybody's going to tell us what your dream job is, what you would do if you won $1 billion in the lottery." And they went around the whole room, and someone wanted to open an orphanage, and someone wanted to be a painter, and someone wanted to live in Hawaii. And they got to me, and I'm like, "I'm doing it. I'm here. I don't have the $1 billion, but I'm doing what I'm doing. I would be here, probably not at 3:00 in the morning in a DI, but."
Yeah, I know. That's great. I love it. So being that every director has a different filmmaking style and working style and personality,
Right.
how do you find the rhythm for successfully working with each one? Is there a secret to your style that makes you so adaptable to so many different personalities?
Well, the one of the most important things, and if you have the luxury to do this, and not always do you have that luxury, but is pick the project. And I can't tell you how many movies I said no to in my career that ended up being disasters, and I could smell it, and I was like, I'm not going there. If you have a bad script and you're offered that job, you might not want to take it. If it feels like a train wreck, and you're like, this is going to be a year of my life, and it's going to be this, I don't want to do this. And if you can smell that and know that that's not for you, I've always said to people, try to make the movies you want to make. In other words, if you could make a movie, movies you love, like, so for instance, if you talk to directors about movies they love, if it's the same movies that you love, that might be a good fit for you. And that's what I do with directors. We talk about movies we love. So when I was going to work with the Russo brothers on Winter Soldier, which was the second Captain America movie, I was in the middle of I think I was finishing Iron Man 3. And Marvel said, hey, these guys want to meet with you. And they're going to do this movie. And I knew the story was going to be a take on a 70s paranoid thriller, but with Captain America. And I'm like, I so badly want to do this movie. Literally my favorite genre. So I met with them. We had a great interview, but I said, before I say yes, you guys, we have to go to dinner. And I said, I'll go anytime you guys are available, anywhere, but we have to go to dinner and make sure that this is going to work. Mm-hmm. Because I didn't want to do that movie if I didn't like them, because it was going to be a lot of work. And and the interview was a regular sort of stale interview, and I couldn't tell if it was real. So we went to dinner, and you can tell, what are they ordering? What do they drink? What's their sense of humor like? Can you have a conversation? Do you feel relaxed with them? And then we started talking about movies. I said, let me just start by asking you guys some of the movies that have influenced the plan for this one, because this is going to be a 70s paranoid thriller. Can you tell me, I said, I'm going to put aside 3 Days of the Condor because I can see the relationship between that movie and what you guys want to do with this. But tell me a couple of other options of films that stylistically will influence this. And they go, well, we were really leaning heavily towards The Conversation, a movie with Gene Hackman, Francis Coppola movie from 1974. I said, okay, stop. I'm in. Let's get another round of drinks. We're doing this movie. We're doing it right now. I'm in. I will work for free. I don't give a shit. This is the greatest thing I've ever heard. And literally, I picked my favorite movie of all time. And I'm like, okay, we're going. And all of a sudden, I'm like, okay, if I am having a great time with these guys at dinner, and we're talking about our favorite movies, and they're all lining up, how hard is this going to be to cut this thing? And you know what? It was like butter. I mean, I got to tell you, it was one of the most creatively fun experiences I've ever had working with directors, was that movie. And it was a big budget, high risk, crazy idea, because they took that character in a direction nobody expected them to take him, and they remapped that character utterly, and they did it. They did it real well, and I loved working with them. And also, they elevated the material in a way that I mean, it's since become a thing that people do to elevate comic book movies to a level of, to push them into, but it's genre experimentation. It's taking superhero genre and fusing it with paranoid thriller, or it's like a lot of really cool genre experimentation that they did.
Yeah.
I just really got into that. I really love working with them. So if you're talking about all that stuff together, I think you're going to be in the zone. Like, for instance, I work with Shane Black. Well, Shane had worked with Dick Donner, so we kind of bonded over having worked with Donner.
Right.
And I understood from being at Donner, when you and I were there on Assassins, it's like that there's an energy around Donner's company, and
Great
Shane
energy.
has kind of got this a great energy. And Shane has this sort of loony, other kind of crazy energy. And you could go, oh, I see Joel Silver, Dick Donner, Shane Black, blah, 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 and I got Lethal Weapon, and I understood the math. And so when I would work with Shane, I was like, I'm working with somebody who like made one of my favorite movies. So again, I'm like, I'm cool. I mean, even though, you know, Shane has a crazy approach to things, it always leads to these really eccentric and awesome ideas. So I loved working with him. So and he's somebody he and I are very different types of people. I mean, there couldn't be two different people on earth, but I adored working with him. And it's interesting how same with Joe Johnston, like, you know, on the first Cap movie, Joe was one of my heroes as a kid because he drew freaking the TIE fighters and the Millennium Falcon. I mean, he drew Star Wars. He was like the artist who created all those images, and he created Yoda, and like he, like, you know, the visual design of it. So here's this guy who basically drew stuff that like made me inspired to be a filmmaker, and I'm working for him as a director. I mean, I was like, I was super intimidated, super scared. And then I remember I showed him a cut the first, like, second day I was on that movie. I showed him a cut of a sequence, and I made him laugh. I had a joke land, and he laughed like crazy at it. And I was like, oh, that's the best. And we were good from there on because he knew we had the same sense of humor. And I think that's a lot of it is, do you have can you be friends, hang out, and have the same sense of humor? Because you're gonna have to sync up on that.
Absolutely. I mean, you're in the room with these people for so many hours a day for so long on end. It really is. Yeah. It's been described as a marriage of a type of marriage, and it really is. So great advice.
Yeah, and they have to trust you. They have to trust you. You have to trust them. That's the most important thing. I think that's probably what it comes down to. Can you trust those directors? Because they're going to take a year of your life. Right. Not can they trust you? Can you trust them? Because you're going to give them a lot.
Yep.
Do they deserve that? Do they deserve your labor over that year? Because you're going to put a lot in that movie if you care. You're going to leave a lot on the field.
I think a lot of people, a lot of editors, certainly newer editors, and, you know, obviously you're coming from a place of a lot of experience, but they're afraid. They're afraid. You know, it's just so important that you get the job, you know? So another thing that seems to be important, especially when you're starting out, is, you know, stay hungry, man. Don't, you know, take on a lot of expenses. I know it's expensive living in LA, but keep your expenses low. Be able to make your own choices.
Yeah, well, I mean, look, filmmaking is, for me at least, and it's changing all the time. And now we're in COVID and everything's sort of different. The way it may not be this way in the future. But I mean, when you're making a film, it's an incredibly, I mean, if you have a job on a film set or even in post, I mean, you're usually working in a pretty, well, I think it's one of the safer places to work. There's a lot of oversight. People are always making sure everybody's safe. It's not like you're, exposed to harsh chemicals. If you're outside, there's usually shelter. They feed you really well. You can usually eat without having to buy yourself a meal when you're on a show. There's craft service. It's, if you're in the union, there's reasonable medical and, care. It's not the worst situation. And I do think that's really one thing to remember when you're younger. You want to have a work-life balance, but at the same time, being available, arranging your financial situation so that you aren't forced into taking any given job, so you can be available for the ones that you really want. We don't always have that luxury. We certainly don't when we're first starting out. Like, I couldn't say no to Little Odessa or to Tia. Didn't want to because they were great opportunities, but I would have had to take what the next thing was in front of me anyway. But one of those cases for me was working with Billy on Shattered Glass. I needed a job at that point. I was at a point where, I hadn't worked in a while. Financially, I needed work. I couldn't sit one out. The right one happened to come along, but you're always going to have to make that choice. But I do think it's important to be available and to be looking and paying attention to what's being made. Like, if you see something that's being made by somebody that you really want to work on, go for it. Try it. You might not get it, but be respectful. Contact them. Ask them if you can work on it. If you can get a foot in the door on something that you really love, it's a win. It's a win, and it will lead to more work if you do a good job. That's the thing. It's a job where if you do a good job, you'll get another one.